You were one of the architects in the first administration of the shock and awe strategy. Trump's different this time around. You're not in the White House this time around, but is there going to be the same shock and awe vibe, or is it something different altogether?
Dasha, I think it's going to be much more intense. We refer to it right now. We refer to it right now as days of thunder, and I think the days of thunder. I think these days of thunder starting next week are just going to be incredibly, incredibly intense. I think you're going to see 50 executive orders. You're going to see a lot of legislation put forward. You're going to see the beginning of it today with Pete Hegseth. So this is going to be quite intense. It's going to be 10 to the 10th power more intense, I believe, than the shock and awe we did in 16 and 17, because remember, there's been 4 years of preparation here. You know, say what you will about Project 2025 and other projects like that at these other think tanks and other groups, but we spent years, people developing the policies, developing the executive orders, seeing the direction of where we want to take this movement, and also developing personnel. You're going to see many more people hit the beach. Many more cabinet people get confirmed much quicker. You're going to have much more thought-through ideas. There are going to be many more executive orders. And most of these, I think at the beginning, or all of them at the beginning, the 50 that I think hit right away, will have Office of Legal Counsel opinions on them. So I tell people, shock and awe was a 17 concept. Days of thunder, I think, are going to be the concept starting next Monday, because I believe President Trump is going to hit it hard with what I call, or Bartley and Wall Street Journal called muzzle velocity. Those types of driving force of policies and personnel to get things done and get them done quickly.
So Heritage Foundation, AFPI, these groups that have been building playbooks like Project 2025, you think that will infiltrate and have an impact on some of the policies of the administration? Steve, did we lose you? Uh-oh, this is the futuristic excitement that I was talking about. Can you hear me, Steve?
Dasha, I'm afraid I didn't hear you. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Testing,
yeah,
one,
I
two.
You
got me.
Hear you now.
All right. Excellent. Thanks for bearing with us, guys. I was saying, you mentioned Project 2025. I mean, Heritage Foundation, AFPI, these groups that have been putting together some playbooks. Do you think that will have an impact and sort of infiltrate some of the policies coming from the administration?
All those. It's not 2025 has become a buzzword, but it's all these different groups over 4 years, particularly people that believe strongly that the 2020 election was stolen, and that President Trump was the rightful president and would come back and win the primary and take the White House again. People dug down and started working these policies. What did we not get accomplished the first time? What do we want to get accomplished now? And people went to work over a 4-year period and built the networks, kind of the subject matter experts and the networks needed to actually have the 3,000 people hit the beach right away that don't have to be Senate confirmed, but also the other 1,000 that have to be Senate confirmed. President Trump's administration this time is 10 times more prepared than when we came in the first, because we were kind of a come from behind victory. As you remember, we didn't have a lot of time to think through transition. There wasn't that deep bench of players that believed in President Trump's philosophy. So not only is President Trump the most powerful individual politically in Washington, he also now has a true army in back of him of people that have spent years thinking through policies, of people that have worked together for years and are prepared now next Monday to hit the beach. And I think you see it right now, what I call the flood the zone concept in the confirmations this week. You're going to see people that are coming together that have great backup, have thought through policy, are prepared to hit a relatively hostile confirmation process, both from a little bit from establishment Republicans, but particularly the Democrats. And I just think, I call it days of thunder. I think people are not prepared right now, particularly the political press, of how intense this is going to be, but this is years in the making.
You talk about the army that's behind him now. The coalition is quite broad. It's so different. I mean, just looking at the events in this coming inaugural weekend, right? You've got the crypto ball, you've got young influencers, you have the Black Conservative Federation, Hispanic ball, all of these folks that weren't engaged last time around. But that makes it a little bit more complicated, right? There are a lot of different interests. I want to talk about some of that, particularly when it comes to Congress. You have Speaker Mike Johnson, who will actually be on this stage later today. Johnson didn't have full Republican support to be Speaker. You have Senate Leader John Thune, who's a Mitch McConnell guy. Are these the right leaders to enact President Trump's agenda?
Let me just talk about your first part of that, about this broad coalition. Think about it for a second. The Democrats, or the established order in Washington, had every source of institutional power. They had the media, they had Wall Street, they had the technology in Silicon Valley, they had the corporatists, they had every lobbyist. This kind of populist nationalist movement, and to show the power. Our new coalition partners are not maybe with us 100% ideologically, but they understand the power of this going forward, that the Democrats basically, because I come from a Democrat family, basically abandoned working class people in the middle class in populism. And they see the power of populism. But clearly, it's a complicated coalition. We have the broligarchs, right? And you have hardcore, populist nationalists. And so that coalition going forward, and you see the collapse kind of the Democratic Party that lost some of the central parts of their thing, particularly Silicon Valley and a little bit of Wall Street. This is now coming together. It's going to be very complicated. You're going to see it play out in the halls of Congress, I believe, because no one really paid attention to this radical idea called modern monetary theory, that right now in Washington, D.C., everything we do, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's deportations, whether it's immigration, even deconstruction of the administrative state, everything is going to be within the framework that a lot of the easy alternatives of how to pay for things and the sustainability, not of the planet, but the sustainability of the economic and financial model of our country and our government is going to be the number one criteria. It's going to be the prism everything is looked through. And these are going to be intense battles. You can see it already, this battle on Capitol Hill between the 1 and 2 reconciliations. This is not simply a process story. This cuts to the heart of how one is going to govern in the future. And President Trump has this tension of at the same time has a coalition that really could end up being 2/3 of the American people if handled correctly. He has to balance that within this framework of this massive debt and the refinancing of this debt and the paying for the refinancing of this debt. So no, I think right now on Capitol Hill it's going to be very intense. Speaker Johnson, and he knows I've never really been a fan. He's got a horrible job. It's a tough job. He's going to have to put together, coalitions, particularly of people that want to have significant reductions in deficits. And I just think even the last couple of days, the mindset in Washington is still wrong. People come up and say, we have a $5 trillion cut, but it's over a 10-year period. We have to get out of that mindset. It is what is the first 2 years. I put my investment banker hat on. This is like a restructuring. Forget 10 years. I'm not interested in 10 years. I'm not interested in the out years. I'm not interested in years 5, 6, and 7. I'm interested in this appropriations process. I'm interested in this deficit. I'm in this year and next year. What's the size of it, how it's going to be financed, and how you have dramatic moves on how to close it. This is one of the reasons I think what Elon's doing at Doge is so absolutely central, not just to deconstruction of the administrative state, but to actually work with Russ Vought and Scott Bessent and come up with a model that Speaker Johnson and Thune could shepherd through the House and the Senate to actually put something on the president's desk that reinforces how do we get back to a sustainable financial and economic model in this country.
But to that point, I mean, there are ideological differences here. So are Johnson and Thune the right leaders in this moment?
I think, look, they were picked by their House members. They were picked by the Senate. President Trump's very comfortable with both people. And I think that's very important because this is going to be like going into combat, right? This is going to be in the moment, it's going to be so intense, and decisions are going to have to be made. You have to trust the judgment of those people. President Trump trusts the judgment of Speaker Johnson. He trusts the judgment of John Thune. I always have different opinions, but I'm just one schmendrick in the crowd, and we're going to fight very intensely for these things. President Trump makes the ultimate decisions, and that's why I think the first most important fight right now it's not just a process fight. It's a fight about how we go forward. That's why I think that the 1 versus 2 reconciliations is probably the most important fight that we're going through right now, and it will set the tone for not just the first year of President Trump's second term, but I think will set the tone for actually how we finance this country and this government going forward.
I mean, on tax policy, for example, there's a lot of talk about lowering the corporate tax rate. Again, these ideological differences. Do you think that kind of focus on corporate tax rate risks alienating the working class that you talk about?
Well, this is why, I'm one voice among many, right? Like I said, I'm just another Schmendrick. However, this is quite critical. This is why we're fighting for two bills. We want to take care of immigration, deportations, energy, and maybe some defense in the first bill that's not revenue generating, and so it could start in the Senate. We agree with Senator Thune and the 53 senators who appear to agree with us to do that. In the tax bill, look, one thing that's disturbed me coming out already. We want the populist wing, right, are going to fight for not just no taxes on tips, but I noticed in Jason Smith's when I missed the part where it said no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, no tax on bonuses.
Those were critical campaign promises.
Our wing of the party, our wing of President Trump's movement that's totally supportive of President Trump want to go and have much more tax cuts for working class people and for the middle class. And if the wealthy and the donors won't get their lobbyists to support lower federal spending, which they're not, they've really been the class that's driven this modern monetary theory that's got us in this jam, that deficits don't matter. Well, now we know deficits do matter because it's the financing and refinancing of those deficits that are killing us. So in that regard, to me, corporate tax rates have to come up and the wealthy have to be taxed more simply for the fact that we have to close this gap on the deficits on an ongoing basis. Now, if they can turn their lobbyists and support Elon Musk and support particularly Russ Vought on having dramatic cuts in federal spending, and I mean in this year and next year. Don't give me 10 years. I'm not interested. When people tell you, oh, it's $6 trillion of cuts over a 10-year period, they are lying to you. This is how we got into this situation. When McCarthy said, oh, they have all these Republican wins. These are not wins. This is another way to kick the can down the road. This has to be addressed now. We're adamant in on the show and talking to people and presenting to President Trump that you have to have many more taxes, particularly the tax cut on Social Security. That is a priority. Any tax cut, particularly even reinstalling the tax cuts of 2017 for the wealthy. As you know, Dasha, I had this huge fight with Gary Cohn and Jared Kushner and Steve Mnuchin in the Oval Office with President Trump. And hey, I lost. I lost, and the Wall Street Journal came out, Bannon's got to go. I lost that round, but I think we're going to win this round. And this is absolutely, I think, central to the vibrancy of the economy and really to the American people. So
you talk about cutting at the federal level. What's the first agency that you would scrap or gut?
Okay, first off, I spent 8 years as a naval officer. I spent almost 4 years at sea on a destroyer. My daughter's a West Point graduate, 101st Airborne, served in Iraq. So Bannons have a history of doing the 5 years as citizens, good citizens, and then going to civilian life. She's been at the support of Pete Hegseth today. She'll be in the audience as a former junior officer to support, female officer to support Pete. Now, that being said, I'm pretty adamant the defense budget's got to be cut. I think you start, first off.
Would Hegseth do that, Steve? Would Hegseth do that?
When people tell you that the problem here is entitlements, they're missing the point. We're not going to get to entitlements. Entitlements right now is a contract with the little guy. They're not going to give up their Social Security. They're not going to give up their Medicare until they see the political class and the donor class actually get their arms around discretionary spending. And to get your arms around this discretionary spending, you have to start with the defense budget. We have to rethink. We have to have a revolution in military affairs, and this is why I think Pete's so important, a revolution in military affairs that then flows through how we actually pay for this. At $900 billion, and this is why I'm so adamant about NATO's got to pay more, the Gulf Emirates and the situation we have in the Middle East have to pay more. We can't have two carrier battle groups in the Red Sea, keeping the Suez Canal open for the Europeans. In East Asia, Japan's got to step up to the plate. Our allies have to step up to the plate. The defense budget is too big. And I realize people say, well, we for years haven't done things. Well, listen, we got to rethink this. If you're going to cut discretionary spending, it has to start with a good faith effort to rethink the defense budget. And to have an NDAA that was $900 billion, given the financial situation we have and given the reality of what we face now, to me is grossly irresponsible. grossly irresponsible, and that has to be addressed head on. And that's why I think the Pete Hegseths of the world and the young warrior caste that fought these horrible wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and understand what's happening in Ukraine and the Middle East are the perfect leaders today to really get in back of significant changes in our defense policy to keep us strong, to make sure that we're the main thing, but are able to think through defense so that we can reorder defense and to get to then the social programs that you're going to have to talk about, and they're going to have to be some reorienting and some cuts, and that to then eventually have a conversation with the American people of entitlements. There's not going to be a conversation. There's not going to be a conversation where they're willing to accept from the political class in Washington anything where they think the political class is a bunch of con men that are bought and paid for by the corporatists, Wall Street, and the donor class, which is exactly the situation we have today.